The darkness pulsed with breath. Every shadow seemed alive. Every flicker of candlelight stretched and twisted into shapes that didn't belong to the world of the living. Riku could hear Aya sobbing beside him, her fingers gripping his sleeve so tightly that her nails drew blood. Kenji was somewhere to his left, whispering something under his breath. A prayer. Maybe. Or a desperate attempt to convince himself this wasn't real. The 7 masked figures sat upright on their futons. They didn't move, didn't speak, but the air trembled, as though each of them exhaled at the same time. Their heads turned toward Riku, their wooden faces gleaming with the reflection of the candles. Riku's flashlight sputtered and went out. Complete darkness. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, measured. The sound came from behind him. He turned just in time to see her. The woman in the blue kimono was standing by the doorway, her head tilted, her eyeless face fixed on him. In one hand, she held something long strands of rope, frayed and ancient, the fibers darkened by time. The same sacred rope they'd seen tied to the stairway upstairs. She began to unwind it as she walked forward. The rope scraped along the floor, leaving faint trails of water where it dragged. Aya's voice cracked through the silence. "Stay away from us." The woman ignored her. She moved with a terrible grace, gliding rather than walking. As she approached the circle of futons, the masked figures began to hum once more low and resonant, vibrating the air itself. Kenji reached for the fallen camera, his fingers brushing against the lens. The red light flickered back to life. The image on the small screen was grainy, but clear enough to show what his eyes could not. The faces behind the masks. They were corpses' gray skin stretched tight over bone, mouths frozen open in silent screams. Kenji gasped, dropping the camera, but the image remained burned into his mind. "They're dead," he whispered. "They've been dead for decades." The woman in blue raised her hands and began to tie the rope into a loop, chanting softly with the others. The words had no meaning, yet they filled the room with unbearable weight. Aya clutched her head. "She's binding us here. She's making us part of the ritual." Riku grabbed Kenji's shoulder. "The camera, turn it off, we need to break the link." Kenji slammed his hand against the side of the device, but the power switch wouldn't respond. The screen flickered violently, showing flashes of faces, rooms, hallways all overlapping, all impossibly distorted. And then, for just 1 second, the camera showed something that made Riku's blood run cold. It showed him standing in the center of the room, wearing a blue kimono. Reflection blinked and smiled. "No," Riku whispered. "That's not me." The woman in blue stopped chanting and turned her head toward him. Her mouth curved upward into the same faint, terrible smile. "You remember?" she whispered, though her voice came from inside his skull rather than her lips. "You wore this once before?" Riku staggered back. "I don't understand, you were the 7th guest," she said. The rope dropped from her hands and slithered across the floor toward him, curling like a living thing. Aya screamed and lunged forward, grabbing his arm, but the moment she touched him, the entire room convulsed. The candles flared, then blew out simultaneously, plunging them into complete darkness. Something cold brushed past Riku's face, a hand, smooth and wet. Then another, and another, until he felt dozens of fingers tracing his skin. Wrapping around his arms, his throat pulling him toward the futons. He thrashed violently, shouting, "Kenji!" Kenji swung the flashlight wildly. The beam cut through the fog, illuminating Riku for just a moment. In that instant, Kenji saw what was happening. The rope had coiled around Riku's neck. The woman in blue was standing behind him, guiding it upward, her hands impossibly long, her smile endless. Kenji lunged forward, grabbing the rope, but his hands passed straight through it, as though it were made of smoke. Riku's eyes met his, wide with terror. "Run," he mouthed. Aya pulled Kenji toward the door. "We can't save him," she cried. Kenji hesitated only a second longer before he let her drag him out. Behind them, the humming swelled into a roar, 1,000 voices rising together. The last thing Kenji saw before the door slammed shut was the woman in blue lifting her head toward him, her empty sockets glowing faintly with light. The sound stopped. The inn fell silent again. Kenji and Aya stumbled through the endless hallways, guided only by the flickering flashlight. The corridors twisted and changed, walls shifting like waves. Every door they passed revealed glimpses of the impossible rooms filled with water, staircases leading into fire, mirrors reflecting places that didn't exist. Finally, they reached the main entrance. The Shimenawa ropes that had once blocked the doors were now untied, hanging loose like the inn itself had released them. Aya pushed the door open. Cold morning light flooded in. They ran until the inn vanished behind them, swallowed by mist. When they reached their van, Aya collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. Kenji bent over, gasping for air. "He's gone," he whispered. She took him. Aya lifted her head. "We can't leave him." Kenji shook his head. "We go back. We'll never leave." She looked toward the road, her eyes hollow. "Then what do we tell people?" Kenji glanced back at the forest, where the fog was already rising again. "We tell them nothing. We burn the footage." But when he turned to check the camera, the screen was already dark. The battery was dead. And when he rewound the footage later that night, every clip was the same, just static, until the very end, where a single frame appeared. Still image of Riku, sitting among 6 others in a circle, his eyes closed, his lips curved in a peaceful smile. For 3 days, Kenji and Aya didn't speak to anyone. They locked themselves in a cheap hotel room near Gifu. Curtains drawn, lights off, the camera lying on the table between them like an unexploded bomb. Neither of them could sleep for more than an hour at a time. Whenever they did, they woke up gasping, certain they had heard the lullaby again, soft, distant, always coming from somewhere behind the walls. Aya sat cross-legged on the bed, staring blankly at the muted TV. "You saw it too," she said finally. Her voice was flat, hollow. Kenji didn't answer. His eyes were on the camera, its black lens reflecting the flickering light from the screen. Aya continued, "That wasn't just a ghost. That was a ritual. And Riku. He wasn't chosen by accident." Kenji rubbed his face with shaking hands. "You're saying he was meant to go there?" "He found the coordinates," she whispered. "He was obsessed with them. Maybe she was already calling him before we even left Tokyo." The silence that followed was unbearable. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft and steady, tapping against the window like fingernails. Kenji turned on the camera one last time, just to prove it was truly over. The footage rolled. At first, static, then brief flashes of movement, walls, doors, the faint glow of lanterns. The audio was warped, filled with low humming. But then came something new, something that hadn't been there before. Riku's voice, calm, even, almost peaceful. "I'm home," it said. Aya jumped to her feet. "Turn it off," she screamed. Kenji slammed his thumb against the power switch, but the screen stayed on. The image sharpened, showing Riku sitting cross-legged on a tatami floor wearing a blue kimono. Around him, 6 shapes knelt in silence. He turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting the camera lens, as though he could see them watching. "Don't come back," he said softly. "The 7th room is full." Then the screen went black. Kenji hurled the camera against the wall. Fragments scattering across the floor. The red recording light blinked twice before dying out completely. Aya sank to her knees, sobbing. "We have to leave Japan. We can't stay here." Kenji nodded, his voice low. "Tomorrow." They packed that night, leaving everything behind: their footage, their gear, even their IDs. At dawn, they drove down the mountain road, without once looking in the mirrors. The fog followed them halfway to town, curling around the van like smoke that didn't want to let go. But the haunting didn't stop when they reached the city. Kenji noticed it first. Every night at exactly 3 a.m., the clock on his phone would freeze for 1 minute before resuming. The apartment lights flickered in time with a faint, rhythmic hum. When he checked his security camera the next morning, he found that the last frame before the glitch always showed the same thing: a blurred figure standing at the end of his hallway. Her hair dripping onto the floor. Aya's nightmares grew worse. She began waking with bruises around her wrists, as if someone had been holding her down. She told Kenji she could hear Riku's voice in her dreams, whispering the same words again and again: "One seat remains." Kenji tried to ignore it. He deleted every copy of the footage he could find, smashed his hard drives, burned the remains of the camera. But technology has its own memory. A week later, while editing an unrelated project on his laptop, a folder appeared on the desktop that he didn't create. It was titled Takamura_Ryokan. Inside were 7 video files, each named for a day of the week. He deleted them. They came back the next morning. On the 7th night, Kenji drove out to the edge of the city and left the laptop on a park bench near the river. He didn't look back. When he returned home, his phone began to ring. The caller ID said unknown number. When he answered, the line was filled with faint static, canned the sound of water dripping. Then, very softly, a woman's voice began to hum. The same lullaby. Kenji threw the phone across the room and collapsed to the floor. He stayed there until sunrise, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, repeating one phrase over and over, "It's over, it's over, it's over." But it never was. 3 months later, Aya disappeared. Her car was found on a narrow road near Gifu, the same one that led to Takamura Inn. The engine was still running. Her phone was on the passenger seat. Recording a short voice memo that ended abruptly at 2:59 a.m., authorities searched the mountain for days. It found nothing, no footprints, no signs of struggle. The only clue was a strip of faded blue silk, tangled around one of the trees near the road. Kenji left Japan shortly after that, never spoke publicly about what happened. But those who met him abroad said he avoided mirrors and refused to stay anywhere with tatami floors. Sometimes when people asked why he left, he would just say, "I once checked into a place that didn't let people go." And though he never went back to Gifu, locals began reporting strange things near the old trail that led to the Ryokan. Travelers claimed they could hear faint singing coming from the woods at night. Some said they saw lanterns glowing deep among the trees. And once, a hiker found an old signpost that hadn't been there before, rotting, weathered, leaning slightly to one side. The storm had passed hours ago, leaving the mountain wrapped in a fog so thick it looked alive. Even the birds were silent. The only sound was the slow crunch of tires over gravel as a small van crawled up the winding road that cut through the dense cedar forest of Gifu Prefecture. Inside were 3 people: Kenji, the cameraman; Ku, the one who found the coordinates online; and Aya, who was supposed to keep them from doing anything stupid. They weren't professional ghost hunters, not really. They were just 3 friends chasing stories for their small YouTube channel, a channel that had been losing views for months. Riku leaned forward, the glow from his phone lighting his sharp features. "It's just a few more kilometers," he said, scrolling through an old post written in broken Japanese. "It says the inn's been abandoned since the 70s. There's no record of who owned it. Locals say it's cursed." Kenji snorted. "Everything's cursed if it doesn't make money." Aya frowned, staring through the windshield. "Then why did someone leave a new comment on that forum just last week? I'd go to the 7th room. That doesn't sound like a forgotten place." Riku grinned, too eager for his own good. "Exactly, which means it's perfect for us." The van turned a sharp corner and came to a narrow bridge made of rotting wood. Below it, the fog churned like white smoke. On the other side, a weathered sign rose from the undergrowth, half swallowed by vines. The faded letters still read, "Ryokan Takamura." The moment they crossed, Aya felt her ears pop, like the air had thickened. The forest seemed to fall away behind them. They parked in front of a long 2-story building with wooden beams darkened by time and rain. The roof sagged under its own weight, but somehow the old inn still stood, stubborn and waiting. Kenji lifted the camera. "All right, here we are. Guy's Takamura Inn. No lights, no road access, no locals for miles. Supposedly every guest who checked in never checked out." He grinned for the camera, but his voice trembled slightly. Riku pushed open the sliding front door. It groaned in protest, then slid open with a soft click. The smell of mildew and burnt incense filled the air. The lobby was still intact, dusty. Tatami mats, a cracked reception counter, a row of faded yukatas hanging behind it. Aya stepped inside first. "This place, it feels wrong." Kenji swung his camera around. "That's the point." The air inside was colder than outside, unnaturally so. Their breath fogged faintly as they stepped deeper into the lobby. The walls were covered with old paper charms, half-torn and blackened at the edges. On the counter sat a brass bell, its surface green with age. Riku pressed it. Ding. The sound rang out and vanished into the halls like something swallowed it whole. Aya flinched. "Don't do that!" But Riku laughed it off. "Come on, it's just a bell." Still, when he turned, he thought he saw something move at the end of the hallway. A flicker of white, like cloth swaying in the dark. He blinked. Nothing. Just empty shadows. "Third floor," Kenji said, reading from his notes. "That's where they found the last guests." Aya looked at him sharply. "Found them? You didn't mention that?" Kenji hesitated. It wasn't confirmed. "Locals say 3 travelers went missing up here in 1972. They were never found. It's only their car was discovered at the bottom of the road." Aya stared at him. "And we're following the same road?" Riku grinned again. "Exactly." They had walked more than 50 feet beyond the entrance when the fog began creeping through the broken windows, filling the corridors like a living thing. The flashlight beams cut through it but dissolved quickly, their glow swallowed whole. "Kenji, keep rolling," Riku whispered, though the sound of his voice already felt muted, as if the walls were swallowing every syllable. The corridor was lined with sliding shiji doors, most of them half open. The paper was yellowed, the wood frames warped from moisture. Tatami mats had begun to rot, softening under their shoes with a faint, damp sound. Aya glanced up. "Do you hear that?" They stopped. Nothing. Not the wind, not insects, not even the creak of the building. The silence was so deep it felt wrong, like standing inside a vacuum. Riku forced a smile. "Relax, the place is abandoned. No one's around to make noise." But Aya's instincts screamed otherwise. Her grandmother used to say that when even the cicadas refused to sing, something older was listening. They followed the narrow hallway toward what used to be the dining area. Along the way, they passed shrines built into the walls, teeny alcoves, filled with offerings long turned to dust. One still held the remains of a candle, its wax melted down into strange spirals that looked more like bone than wax. Kenji panned his camera across the hall. "Check this out," plates still on the tables. "The floor is covered in dust, but it looks like nobody ever cleared the dishes." Aya ran her fingers over one of the bowls. The rice inside had hardened into a gray lump, fused to the ceramic, untouched for decades. Riku crouched near a low shelf and brushed aside a layer of dust. Beneath it lay a folded piece of fabrica, faded white sash tied in a knot.
Ass!
As he lifted it, something clattered out, a wooden tag with a name carved in kanji so old he could barely read it. "What does it say?" Kenji asked. Riku squinted. "Guess number 7. Aya stepped back. "Number 7. It's not a name." Before they could react, the faint tink-tink of metal echoed from deeper in the corridor, rhythmic and deliberate, like something tapping against a pipe. Kenji swung his camera around. "There's someone else here." They followed the sound, their footsteps crunching over debris. The hall opened into a larger tatami room. The sliding doors had all been pushed aside, revealing a space that must once have been used for banquets. In the center sat a low round table surrounded by zabuton cushions, 5 of them, arranged perfectly in a circle. Kenji whispered, "Look how clean they are." He was right. While everything else in the building was blanketed in dust, the cushions looked recently fluffed, their fabric smooth, the space around them spotless. Aya stepped forward slowly. "Don't touch anything." But Riku, ever the explorer, couldn't resist. He aimed the flashlight at the ceiling. There's no dust falling, no drafts. Like someone's been maintaining this place. Kenji zoomed in the camera. Something has. They kept moving, climbing the staircase at the far end of the hall. The wooden steps groaned under their weight. Halfway up, they saw a thick rope of straw hanging from the banister in old Shimenawa, the kind used at shrines to mark sacred or forbidden spaces. Its once white paper streamers were stained brown with age. Aya paused, staring at it. "This isn't just decoration. It means we're not supposed to go any further." Riku brushed past her. "Or it means that's exactly where the story starts." He stepped over the rope. The air shifted again. The temperature dropped so sharply that Aya could see her breath. Behind them, something creaked softly, like a door opening on its own. Kenji turned, his camera trembling slightly. "Was that you?" But neither Riku nor Aya had moved. Somewhere above them came the faint thud of a footstep. One, then another, then a third, slow, heavy, deliberate. Kenji whispered, "There's someone on the second floor." Aya's face had gone pale. No one's supposed to be here. And yet the footsteps continued, pacing back and forth directly above their heads. Riku looked up toward the ceiling. "You wanted proof?" he murmured to himself. "There it is."
The stairs moaned beneath their weight as they climbed toward the second floor. Every step felt like it might collapse underfoot, yet the structure held too solid. To patient, Kenji kept his camera pointed upward, his flashlight beam slicing through the dust motes that floated in the air like tiny spirits. At the top of the stairs, a long corridor stretched out before them. The walls were still lined with faded paintings, mountain streams, geishas, cherry blossoms, but each face in the paintings had been scratched away, leaving behind ghostly silhouettes. Aya whispered, "It's like someone didn't want to be watched." They walked slowly, the floorboards groaning beneath every footstep. Then something caught Riku's Aja red lantern hanging from the ceiling, still faintly glowing. He pointed. "How is that even possible? There's no power here." Kenji zoomed in on it. The lantern's light flickered, but there was no bulb, no candle, just a pulsing red glow, like breath trapped inside paper. Aya's voice trembled. "Maybe we should go back." Riku ignored her. "No, we document everything." They reached the end of the corridor and found a row of guest rooms. The sliding doors were closed, each marked with an old number plate. Most were faded, but one stood out, room 7, its brass plate untarnished and clean. Aya froze. "That's the same number as the tag downstairs." Riku approached the door, pressing his ear against it. "Do you hear that?" Kenji listened. Beneath the silence, there was a low humming sound, rhythmic and almost melodic. "It's like someone singing," Aya whispered. The sound grew clearer as Riku slid the door open. The room beyond was immaculate Totomi mats, unblemished futons, neatly folded, a tea set resting perfectly arranged on the low table. It looked as though someone had just stepped out moments before. Kenji swept the flashlight across the room. "This place hasn't aged a day." Aya crouched near the tea set, her fingers trembling. The porcelain cups were still warm, her breath caught. "Riku, this isn't right. Someone's still here." Riku stepped inside, looking around. Or something wants it to look that way. Against the far wall stood an antique clock, its brass pendulum still swinging. The hands pointed to 3 a.m., yet the clock wasn't ticking forward, it was ticking backward. Kenji zoomed in. "You're seeing this, right?" The pendulum swung faster, and the air thickened with a deep vibration that made the tatami quiver under their knees. Aya covered her ears, her heart pounding. Then, from somewhere inside the walls, they heard a muffled thump. Another, and another, like something struggling to get out. Kenji whispered, "It's coming from behind the wall panel." Riku hesitated for just a moment before sliding it open. Inside was a narrow crawl space lined with faded paper charms. In the center sat a small wooden box covered in white cloth. The moment the panel moved, the humming stopped. Aya whispered, "Don't." But Riku had already reached for the cloth. As he pulled it away, dust burst into the air, and the temperature dropped another few degrees. Inside the box lay a single object, a lacquered mask of a woman's face. Its lips were painted red, the corners turned upward in a smile that felt far too human. The eyes were hollow, deep enough to swallow light. Kenji whispered. "That's a no mask." Aya shook her head, backing away. "No, that's not Theatre Ritz funerary." Riku frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" She swallowed hard. Masks like this were used in old death rituals. They believed a mask could trick a spirit into staying behind. While the body moved on, the air shifted against soft, deliberate, like a sigh from behind the walls. Kenji turned to face her, his camera trembling. "Aya, what? There's someone standing behind you." She froze, her breath hitched. Slowly, she turned toward the door. In the doorway stood the faint outline of a woman in a pale kimono. Her head tilted to one side, her hair hanging wet and limp across her face. The red lantern behind her pulsed once, twice, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. For a long moment, there was only breathing their own, and something else, slower, closer. Then came the soft sound of bare feet stepping across tatami.
Kenji's flashlight flickered to life again, slicing through the darkness just as the last echo of that soft step faded. The beam landed on the doorway, but the woman was gone. Only the faint imprint of wet feet remained on the tatami, leading away toward the hall. Aya's voice trembled. "Please, tell me you got that on camera." Kenji glanced at the viewfinder. The recording was still running, the red light blinking steady. He rewound a few seconds, hit play nothing. The screen showed the empty doorway. The footprints weren't there. "Didn't record," he whispered. Riku forced a shaky laugh. "Maybe the battery glitched." "Then why is it still filming?" Kenji snapped. The air felt heavier now, pressing against their chests. Riku grabbed the mask box and shoved it back into the wall, sliding the panel shut with a sharp crack. "Let's move. I don't want to find out what else is in here." They backed out into the hall. The lanterns were flickering again, casting red shadows that seemed to shift even when nothing moved. At the far end of the corridor, the stairs that led up to the third floor waited shrouded in mist. Aya whispered, "There's no reason to go higher." Riku turned to her, eyes gleaming with the thrill of discovery that overrode his fear. "We've come this far. If the story's true, the third floor's where it happened." Kenji swallowed. "Where what happened?" Riku hesitated. "The mass ritual. 7 guests, ain't none left alive." Ia's voice rose, sharper now. "That's not research, Riku. That's suicide." He ignored her, starting up the stairs. The wood groaned beneath his boots. The moment his foot touched the third step, something above creaked in response. A step, another, then silence. Kenji aimed the flashlight upward, but the beam was devoured by darkness. Dust drifted lazily down, like ash falling after a fire. Aya whispered, "Someone's walking up there." Riku forced a smirk. "Or it's just the wind." But the air was still. Then came the sound again, footsteps, slow and deliberate, pacing directly above them. The wood flexed with each one. Kenji raised the camera. The mic caught the faint rhythm perfectly. 1 step, pause. 2 steps, pause. Drag. Aya's breath hitched. "It's moving toward us." Riku pressed forward, heart hammering, refusing to stop. "If we get this on film, we'll never have to work another day in our lives," Kenji muttered. "We'll be lucky if we live through tonight." They reached the top of the stairs. A narrow hallway stretched before them, lined with closed doors. At the far end, one stood slightly ajar, a dim light pulsing from within. Riku gestured toward it. There, as they approached, the light inside the room flickered in rhythm with the footsteps, like a heartbeat. Kenji's camera shook in his hands as the beam of his flashlight trembled against the walls. Aya whispered, "Please, let's just leave." Riku didn't answer. He pushed the door open. Inside, the room was empty, except for a small table with an old electric clock sitting in the center. Its red digits glowed bright against the gloom. But the numbers weren't right. The clock wasn't counting. Tamit was counting down. 2 o'clock, 1:59, 1:58. Kenji's voice cracked. The hell is that? Riku frowned, stepping closer. A timer. Aya's pulse thundered in her ears. For what? Before anyone could answer, the sound began again. Footsteps, this time not above, but all around. The ceiling, the walls, the floor. The boards trembled as if something was walking inside them, circling, closing in. Kenji turned, his flashlight darting across the walls. The surface rippled faintly under the beam like fabric breathing. Then, all at once, the humming returned. It started as a single voice, soft, female, distant. Then more joined in. A chorus, low and rhythmic, chanting words that didn't belong to any language Aya had ever heard. Kenji backed away from the clock, his camera catching glimpses of shapes moving behind the rice paper walls tall, slender, bending forms. The timer on the clock hit 0 o'clock. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Then the clock began ticking upward, the numbers glowing in reverse 001, 002, 003, counting time back into existence. The humming grew louder, the voices clearer, until it felt like the entire building was singing. Aya clutched her head. It's inside my ears, make it stop. Riku stumbled back toward the hall, shouting over the noise. Downstairs. Go. But when Kenji turned toward the door, it was gone. The frame was still there, but beyond it, there was nothing but a black wall. Riku's voice broke. The door had sealed. Aya's eyes widened in horror. We're not supposed to be here. Kenji turned his camera toward her, whispering through the noise. Then who is? A voice clear and cold whispered from the darkness. Guests who never left. And then, above them, something heavy began to walk again. Slow, measured, coming closer. The footsteps above them quickened, spreading like rainfall across the ceiling. Then came a new sound, a faint rhythmic tapping that echoed from within the walls, like fingernails brushing against wood. Each tap seemed to answer the beat of their own hearts. Kenji pressed his back against the wall, his flashlight darting wildly. They're moving between the rooms, he said hoarsely. Can hear them. Riku held up a hand. Quiet. They all froze. Tapping stopped. For a brief moment, there was only silence. Suffocating silence. Then, out of nowhere, came a whisper, slithered through the air like smoke, impossible to locate. Dozens of voices speaking at once, murmuring in a language that was not Japanese, not anything they'd ever heard. The sound came from the walls, the ceiling, beneath the floor, surrounding them completely. Aya's knees went weak. They're everywhere. Kenji swung the camera in a slow circle, his flashlight trembling. They're inside the walls. The whispering grew louder until the words began to separate, forming fragments that almost made sense. ... 7 ... return ... complete. Riku swallowed hard. 7 what? Before anyone could answer, the entire corridor trembled. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The red lanterns hanging along the walls flickered to life one by one, each bursting into a dim, pulsing glow. The shadows they cast no longer matched the movements of the 3 living people standing there. In the corner of the camera's frame, a shadow lingered tall, thin, its head tilted unnaturally. Kenji gasped. Someone's behind us! He swung the camera around, but the corridor was empty. The figure had vanished. Aya grabbed his arm, her voice breaking. Kenji, look, the lens screen was still showing the shadow, standing right behind Riku. It didn't move, didn't breathe. Just watched. Riku turned sharply, but saw nothing. Stop trying to scare me, he snapped. Kenji's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm not. The air grew dense, heavy with the scent of damp wood and something metallic blood, old and rusted. A low hum started again, rising from the floorboards beneath them. Aya pointed toward a paper door ahead, one that hadn't been there a minute before. That wasn't there before. Riku hesitated, then took a cautious step forward. The door pulsed slightly, as if breathing in rhythm with the whispers. When he slid it open, a rush of cold air hit them, smelling of decay and river water. The room beyond was small and nearly empty, except for one thing, a camera, identical to Kenji's, resting on a tripod in the center of the tatami mat. Its red light was blinking, recording. Kenji's heart skipped. That's not mine. He stepped closer, peering at the screen. The video feed showed the three of them standing in the hallway, frozen. But behind their reflections, 7 faint figures could be seen kneeling in a circle, their heads bowed. Aya's voice cracked. "It's showing another time, no," Kenji said softly. "It's showing this time." Then one of the figures lifted its head. Its face was featureless, smooth as wet clay. But when its head turned fully toward the camera, a single mouth appeared, stretching wider and wider until the shape resembled a silent scream. The power in the entire inn flickered. Lights blinked, shadows danced. Kenji stumbled back, shouting, "Turn it off." Riku reached for the camera, but before he could touch it, the screen exploded into static. A screeching sound filled the air, shrill and mechanical, like 1,000 voices trapped inside a broken speaker. Aya clutched her ears. "Make it stop. Ah, please." And then, all at once, the noise cut out. The inn went still again, but the walls, they were moving. Slowly, the rice paper began to bulge inward, as though dozens of unseen hands were pressing from the other side. Faint outlines of faces formed in the paper, mouths opening and closing soundlessly, eyes wide and glassy. Riku stumbled back, breathless. "We need to leave now." They turned toward the stairs, but the corridor had changed. The hall was longer now, the lanterns stretching endlessly in both directions. The stairs were gone. Kenji raised the camera again, his hands trembling. "We're trapped." Aya began to cry quietly, clutching her cross pendant. "Please let us out." From somewhere deep in the inn came the slow creak of a door opening, then closing. Another door followed, then another, until the sound became a steady rhythm. Echoing through the halls like a heartbeat, Kenji whispered, "They're waking up." Riku spun around, his flashlight catching movement at the far end of the corridor. A figure in a blue kimono stepped forward, her bare feet silent on the tatami. Her face was hidden behind long black hair. Aya's voice dropped to a whisper. "She's the one from the legend." The woman tilted her head and her hair parted just enough for them to see her face or what was left of it. Her eyes were gone. The woman in the blue kimono stood perfectly still, her head slightly tilted as if listening to something none of them could hear. The hem of her robe was soaked, droplets of water dripping onto the tatami, darkening it one spot at a time. The smell of river mud filled the air, damp, earthy, and ancient. No one moved. No one dared to breathe. Then came the sound, a faint melodic humming, rising from somewhere deep within the inn. It was soft at first, like a lullaby whispered to a child long ago. Then it spread, echoing through the halls, multiplying into countless, overlapping voices. The tone was both gentle and horrifying, a song that promised peace and death in the same breath. Aya clutched Kenji's sleeve. "It's the same melody, ... From the old recordings, Kenji barely managed to whisper, "What recordings?" "The story," Aya said, her voice shaking. "They said 7 guests once stayed here. The staff sang to them before dawn, before they were never seen again." The humming grew louder, closer. The woman in blue began to move slowly, deliberately, each step in perfect rhythm with the song. Her bare feet left wet prints that steamed faintly against the cold floor. When she passed beneath a lantern, the light dimmed until it was almost black. Riku raised the flashlight. "Stay back!" he shouted, his voice trembling. The woman stopped. Her head lifted just enough for them to see her mouth a small, perfect smile. Then, in a voice that sounded like 100 whispers speaking together, she said, "The rooms are ready." The lanterns flared to life all at once. Behind them, doors slid open on both sides of the corridor. From each room, pale shapes began to emerge, figures in ceremonial robes, faces covered by blank wooden masks. They moved in silence, their feet gliding over the tatami as they formed a circle around the 3 intruders. Kenji's camera shook violently in his hands. "Riku, me too." Before he could finish, one of the masked figures reached out and touched the lens. The feed distorted, the image bending and twisting like melting film. Riku swung the flashlight around, trying to find a gap between the figures. There was none. The air thickened until breathing felt like inhaling smoke. Dada fell to her knees, her voice breaking. "They're performing the ritual again." Took their places. Riku grabbed her arm, desperate. "Get up! Don't give them what they want!" But the masked figures began to hum again, their song growing louder, deeper. The melody vibrated in the bones, crawling through their bodies until it felt like their hearts were matching its rhythm. Kenji stumbled backward. There. They're making us part of it. Aya looked around wildly. There were 7 cushions downstairs. 7 guests. We're 3. Her eyes widened in horror. They're waiting for 4 more. The woman in blue stepped closer. Up close, her kimono shimmered with faint patterns, hands, faces, silhouettes pressed into the fabric as if trapped beneath it. She leaned down toward Aya, her eyeless sockets hollow and infinite. "Stay," she whispered. "There's still room." Kenji screamed, shoving her away. The woman staggered back, but her feet never made a sound. She lifted her hand, and the entire inn seemed to breathe in unison. The air shifted, the floorboards groaned, and the walls began to move again. The corridor stretched longer, the lanterns spinning into blurs of red light. Riku shouted, "This way!" and pulled Aya to her feet. They ran down the endless hallway, the walls pulsing beside them like veins filled with light. Behind them, the humming had become a full chant, low rhythmic, almost mechanical. Kenji followed, his camera still rolling, capturing glimpses of faces that appeared and disappeared in the walls, smiling mouths, hollow eyes, shadows bending in impossible ways. They reached a stairwell that hadn't been there before. The steps descended into a dark space filled with mist. Without hesitation, they ran. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The chant above faded into a single haunting note that seemed to follow them. At the bottom of the stairs, they found a large room circular, with 7 futons laid in a perfect ring. Candles burned at each corner, their flames unmoving despite the draft. Aya gasped. "This is it. This is where they died." Kenji raised the camera. "We have to document it." But before he could speak another word, one of the futons twitched, then another. Slowly, shapes began to rise beneath the blankets, bodies turning over, stretching, awakening after decades of sleep. The woman in the blue kimono appeared in the center of the room, her song now soft and almost sweet. "They've waited so long," she whispered. "Now, the circle is complete." Riku backed away, his voice breaking. No, it's not. There are only 6. The woman tilted her head toward him. "Then you will be the 7th. The candlelight flickered violently. Shadows swirled, crawling across the walls like ink. Ow. The figures under the futons sat up in perfect unison, their masks reflecting the candlelight in 7 gleaming points. Aya screamed. Kenji's camera clattered to the floor, the red light blinking one last time before cutting to black. Then, in the dark, the lullaby began again, soft, endless, and terribly familiar.